Today in News Tech, who owns the U.S. news? We're going to follow the money and see where is the ownership in the print and digital market. Looking at news engagement in 2021, which fell off a cliff compared to 2022, but what does that really mean for local publishers? Also looking at what is the real issue around cookies, and the theory is it's an issue of publisher trust. We'll hear from Tyler on that. We're going to go into an overview of third-party cookies going away and some of the observations I've noticed just personally and what this could mean for publishers. I think it's an opportunity. Let's get to our first story, brought to us from Chris, usually behind the camera, but definitely going to be joining us from now on. Thank you so much, Chris, for all your contributions here. You wrote this article just a couple of days ago. Tell us about it.
Thanks again, Matt, for having me. I knew that we've been working with Press Gazette on some collaborative things, so I thought I'd go across their site and see what they've been doing recently.
Right.
And I came across this article on diversity in the ownership and dissemination of both digital broadcast and print news. And this is a very dense but informative analysis done by the Press Gazette team themselves, collating data from visitor log data from SimilarWeb over a 6-month period, as well as the Future of Media project at Harvard University, which actually keeps track of all the big companies, Gannett, Alden Capital, and state by state, which local newspapers that they've run, that they've bought over the past few years. But I'll go ahead and play this video to kind of set it up. And then I want to spend most of the time looking at these bullet points, but these bullet points actually are encapsulated very well by some charts on the original article. So I thought we could kind of hop back and forth between those two, because just some of this language and numbers can be a little dense without the visuals. But let's start off with the video.
Today, we're highlighting a piece by Aisha Majid over at Press Gazette. The article, Who Owns the U.S. News? Market Share Analysis of Print and Online News Markets, discusses their analysis of diversity in the U.S. news market. The analysis utilized visitor data from SimilarWeb along with data from the Media Index of the top 7 big owners of daily publications from the Future of Media project at Harvard University. Here are a few of the big takeaways. Even the largest media outlet in the digital space, Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation, which owns FoxNews.com and the New York Post, only garnered 12% of the visits to the top 50 sites in the U.S., while smaller outlets, with a share of less than 3% individually, collectively accounted for 40% of visits to the top sites. A second metric presented in the analysis is that of ownership across media types, digital, print, and broadcast, with publicly traded companies making up close to 40% of the market share. However, nonprofit and private-for-profit outlets follow with 27% and 17% respectively. Turning specifically to print, the analysis found that only 3 companies averaged over 1 million in circulation over a 6-month period in 2021: Gannett, Alden Capital, and Lee Enterprises, with a marked increase in acquisitions over the past decade. For smaller local publishers, the diversity numbers in the digital space are positive, but print continues to suffer, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic began. Our hometown offers these local newspapers sophisticated tools to increase their online presence so that even a reduced print circulation can be overcome.
I got some questions for sure. What did you want to expand on here? Because maybe you'll just answer them. You want to start there?
I'll basically start with this first bullet point, and it's basically of the big news conglomerates. They actually don't even put together match everybody else. So if I switch over to this chart, it'll be a little easier to explain. So any news outlet that has less than 3% market share was bundled into the other category.
Okay.
And then these are the big 7 as defined by the Harvard study. And so you can see that 12, 11, 10, all of that kind of stuff kind of gives us that there is a balance in the digital space between the kind of smaller outlets versus the combination of the big 7. And that was what I thought was the positive thing to be taken from this, is that even with all of their small paper acquisitions all over the place, that because they focus, I think, so much of their digital content through their bigger named properties, such as Fox News, NewYorkPost.com, stuff like that, that these smaller digital publications are able to actually achieve a decent amount of readership. And so if I jump over to where their first source was SimilarWeb, or a web tracking company, and as you can see, here's the top 5 news media outlets in the United States. They just as a splash screen, you got Yahoo, CNN, MSN, Fox News, and then the New York Times. Mm-hmm. And then if you actually switch over to a bit more granular, this is worldwide, not US. You have to have a bit more of a paywall to get more granular than this. But you can see, once again, it's Yahoo, Globo, BBC, even news.google.com are in here. But there's lots of foreign language based ones that are in here. And actually, if you hover over these a little bit very quickly, it'll give you the rank: 38th in the United States, 98th global, and 11 in the subcategory of news and media.
Right.
So what this chart is trying to tell us is that there is a lot of other stuff going on that's outside of the big 7 conglomerates that kind of, as the other, if I slide down here again to the one of the dominants of these 3 companies, you notice there's a few of them that are right there: Gannett, Lee, and Alden Capital. Those are the ones that have the big print circulations, but they don't dominate in the same way in the digital space.
Right.
That kind of summarizes this first point.
Okay. Gotcha.
And if I jump back over, there was also a lovely look at who owns what. And it turns out publicly traded, those are some of the big conglomerations. Those are the ones that have CEOs, big boards, shareholders that have to be beholden to. Right. But right behind them are nonprofits. That's NPR.
Interesting. Yeah.
AP News. Stuff like that. And then, of course, that's followed by some of the private, but still for-profit. Mm-hmm. But a private for-profit, that's kind of like Bezos with Washington Post, where he's not beholden to shareholders in the same way that that the Murdoch stuff is, and things like that.
Sure.
And finally, I already touched on this a little bit, but when it comes to print, it's dominated by the big guys. They pretty much, over the past decade, I'll flip back one more time. This is the number of transactions, which basically equates to acquisitions of companies. And they specifically mention 2019 Gannett buying Fortress Media. And so these big companies have been doing that. And that has basically made a really big impact on print circulations. But I thought one of the more positive points about this analysis was that the smaller outlets are still able to compete because the digital space has become such a major part of how you get your news.
Right.
I'll flip over, just since I mentioned SimilarWeb here, I'll also mention these are the big 7 from Harvard study, and you can basically go state by state and see who they own.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
And it has, owns 56 dailies from Alden. McClatchy has 30. Gatehouse Media, which is Gannett, has 260. And these are of course by state, but these numbers are their total ownership. Right. And so that's where it kind of, in the analysis, it was a bit of a hybrid between, okay, who owns these things, but that's what's been affecting print, but not affecting digital as much. It seemed to be kind of the big picture takeaway of all 3 of those points that I wanted to make in the article.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is some macroeconomic stuff, and I'm trying to tie it, to the future of the other publishers that you kind of bundled all into that, or that they bundled into that one group. It seems like it's got to be good to have the money coming from a lot of different people. We don't want Jeff Bezos, at the top of that list, deciding what, not directly, but he's controlling what's coming out from the Washington Post on some level.
He's certainly been accused of that by some of his rivals.
I've heard about Bill Gates giving a ton of money to news organizations. And, I think a lot of people just don't like to see that. Individuals funding these information outlets. It has potential to go bad.
To turn back to Mentagem, them having their local funding, but then also having some of the more corporate funding where Google's not giving them money to control their content. They just want these ideas to grow, to kind of ferment and whatnot. And those kind of large money donations, I think, can be helpful. But absolutely, when you have some large conglomerate shareholder entity that's pretty much hacking your newsroom in half and making things more regional instead of local, more national instead of regional, it creates news deserts. Are kind of arise from this issue.
That's all related. Yeah, I still can't believe this story about Alden, and they were trying to do a hostile takeover.
Back here, they're 2 and 3 in the circulation numbers.
Oh my God, yeah, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to just merge and acquire to get bigger than Gannett. Except for the really big guys that can afford to sustain an unprofitable product, everyone else is dropping circulation. It's going to digital. So that's my impression from this. It seems like a large company like Gannett, they're going to keep printing probably the longest, because
this even mentions right here, merging the Harvard Future of Media List and Dailies and the UNC News Deserts project.
Right. I mean, news deserts is like a real problem. I think
this next chart kind of deals with that.
Yeah. Right.
Look who owns what in each state, and you look at how much local news has suffered, depending on how many of their local news dailies have been bought by one of these guys down here.
Right. Percent share of daily newspapers. Okay. Yeah. You got Utah right there. Montana.
54% are owned in Montana.
Okay.
My home state, 50% in North Carolina.
Right. One thing that jumped out at me earlier was Google was on the list. They don't own news, or they're not publishers.
They were
funded.
part of the top 50 list of sites that are visited. So not as a publisher, and that's why they kind of fall into that 40% category, because yes, they're not owned by a news conglomerate. They're just a site that gets a lot of visitors for news.
Yeah, so it's the digital disruption. That's kind of what's led to that chart flattening out and not having a lot of centralization of the power, like right there. Yeah, that one.
And this is where I thought it would tie into the Our Hometown model, is because what we can do is help all of these smaller papers that are coming out, and they've got 5 or 6 people trying to put out their print edition. They've been losing ad revenue or readership on their print side. And if we provide them the tools, the advertising networks, the ways of getting themselves a larger presence on social media, that can offset what they've been losing on the print side, so they don't have to close. And they can still provide print to those customers that want it.
Right, exactly. Yes, that's the biggest objective that we have. It's a more long-term one, so it's not something that we're talking about every day. But yes, obviously, there's going to be a time where print goes away.
Publishers need to be positioned.
Well, okay, maybe I shouldn't say that.
Well, that's why I was saying that if digital can support the waning print circulation, then they can still keep print around for whoever might still really want that. The people who still want to go to the library and find a newspaper.
I have to say, just this week, and today's only Thursday, I have seen 2 requests come in for people who accidentally subscribed to online and they want the print. And then there was one who wanted to switch from online to print.
Wow.
So, great. Hopefully maybe that's a trend,
Well, look, yeah, I mean,
the pendulum swings, and it always swings back. So
could you make a parallel between streaming audio versus buying vinyl again, which is been a really interesting.
For sure. Right. It's a different experience. Yeah. I mean, the quality is different. I mean, there's so many reasons to go back.
You don't get pop-up ads on a newspaper.
Right. Exactly. I had a weird thing happen last week where I had no phone for a whole day. That was an enlightening thing. Of course, now that I've gotten it fixed, I'm back using it constantly. But I mean, I think people maybe are starting to push back. It's not about being connected all the time, even though you can be. who really wants that? You need more quiet in your life sometimes. And this, to me, in terms of the economics, it's funny because when I started in this business, the print was funding the digital because there wasn't really a profit in digital yet. It was mainly just an investment in the future. Maybe that's flipped on its head too, in the sense that digital will be the primary revenue driver, and then it kind of supports print, which may not be as profitable.
It could be where you focus on your regular daily news through your digital outlets, but then you can have special print editions of content that are really curated and things like that just don't come out as often, but still keep both audiences happy.
I was just going to say, again, this might have something to do with the whole pandemic. It shut down and the way that lifestyles changed. And, you've heard me talk about my mother before. She loves her Amherst Bee, but she always picked it up at the store. Well, she hasn't been getting it for a year. So I bought her a subscription to the Amherst Bee. And yesterday I got a phone call. She was giddy like a 2-year-old. She hadn't even opened it yet. She just had it in her hand.
Wow.
So,
wow, that's nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think print is ever going to go away, but I think we might see a little bit of an uptick, and that's one of my projections again.
And a bit with numbers is Press Gazette did have an analysis earlier that the top 25 largest newspapers have lost 20% of their weekday print since COVID began.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we're just hoping that the digital can offset that. And perhaps once the pandemic type effects have decreased, we can see those numbers come back up.
Right. That's what I'm thinking is going to happen. I think may not come back to what it was, but I think it's definitely going to come back somewhat. And we might be surprised. It might come back even a little more. So,
yeah. I mean, that's just a big question for like anything. Anything and anybody. I mean, like conferences, for example, is one thing that we're not doing this year. We don't really have any plans to do it, but it might be a good thing to get back into in a feyu years.
I think publishers miss that. There's
a unique thing.
Fellowship.
Right. It's something that, you just cannot replicate certain aspects of that in a webinar. That's just impossible. You can get the information across, but networking and things like that is incredibly awkward on Zoom. It just doesn't work.
Chris, I had a question about the chart that you're on right now, nonprofits. What's your take on that?
Well,
because I mean, there are nonprofits. I think they're becoming more publicized. I think the nonprofits have been out there, but I think they're taking a bigger presence for people now, where you're seeing more nonprofits and more philanthropy entities bringing money to these papers. What's your take?
I would certainly say so, because when they were talking about the nonprofits, they're talking mainly about Radio Digital Network, NPR, and AP News. And if you also look at pretty much any local NPR-based station, where do they get their money from? They get it from the community donating money so that they can buy the syndicated content, so that they can have a newsroom, so that they can create news that way. I think one of the selling points they've made when they're asking for money is the fact that they're not beholden to the same oversight type things. They're beholden to the community that's donating to them instead of Murdoch or Gannett or things like that. So I think the nonprofits themselves have been raising awareness of the services that they're providing, in contrast to some of these other outlets that are owned by these big companies.
Right. And that is directly related to the pandemic, because we saw a lot of papers promote their stewardship to their readers, how they are stewards of the news to the community.
Right. Wow.
I did have one other related thing as a post. This is from the same author. So this might be a pitch for something that we could look at next time.
Great.
Is the 2021 media industry and charts. We got another analysis, and you're talking about ad spending coming back, digital subscriptions growing, but how press freedom has declined. I have not looked at this article yet, but the headline grabbed me. So I thought it might be another good one to look at.
Nice teaser there. All right. Very cool. Anything else you want to go over, Chris? That was wonderful.
Well, no, thank you very much. This was just something that caught my eye. And
Definitely.
and I love this kind of analytics and
Right.
looking at as you said, the macro thing and how that's affecting our industry. But then when it showed how there is still diversity in the digital side, that
Right.
is what gives me hope for what we can do at our hometown.
Local independent ownership. Yeah.
We should make this a yearly thing. Let's look,
Yeah.
make a
Well-
note to look at this time next year and see.
The ownership. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
Well,
Just
that's why
think
I was looking at some of the other things by Aisha, just to see, because she seems to be
right.
kind of focused on some of the analytics side of what Press Gazette does.
Well, speaking of Press Gazette, so this is the Press Gazette Future Media. Tyler and I met with Dominic, the publisher, directly. Really nice guy, super forward thinking. He had a really interesting webinar a couple of weeks ago where he interviewed a lot of folks. They're doing a lot of the same things that we think are important, but they've got this very popular newsletter. This went out to, I think, about 10,000 people in the US, and there's our ad. So, of course, today's podcast, so Today in News Tech, is brought to you by Our Hometown and audio articles. So this is just an example of what we can do for any publisher. We can turn all your text articles on the website into audio. And that's what this promotion is all about. We're trying to get some exposure in the UK. I wanted to start with this because this is the simplest way to start working with a publisher. Much easier than redoing their website. So this is our first pass to try to get some attention for the company. We've got some testimonials in here from Kristen and Guy. We spent a lot of time on this, Tyler and I and Jack, in designing the site and just really keying into the tracking. I learned so much about this campaign that I think every publisher could benefit from. Any kind of tracking that you can do to better understand what's working and what isn't, and then focus on what is working is good. A lot of things that we did with this page are kind of innovative. Anchor link, it'll jump around on a single page. So it just kind of is always driving them to sign up. Every chance we get, at every block, there's an option to try it today and get right down to that setup form. I thought a lot about designing the user experience, and it got me thinking about the user experience for newspaper subscribers when they're buying a subscription. Hopefully we can take a lot of the things we learned here and apply it elsewhere. So this is our plug with them. We'll see what the traffic looks like this week. This was the big headline for the news business, I think. And like Terry said, it probably saw it everywhere this week because all the data was finally in. They could get a true comparison from January 1 last year to now. Big decrease all around, probably the biggest one on social media interactions with news. But to me, this all just says we should compare 2021 to 2019 because 2020 is just such an anomaly. As I said earlier, it's like just what goes up must come down. If there's some external force on a system and it's throwing everything out of whack, of course, it's going to go back towards where it was before. But the question is it higher than it was in 2019, in 2021? I think people were hoping that it would stay at those levels, but we saw almost 2x increase in traffic at the peak of COVID. Of course, that's not going to sustain. Any comments on this at all?
I'm curious, does it mention local outlets, how they've been affected, or is this all in the context of national?
It's not broken down like that. Maybe we could do our own kind of research study on this.
Maybe it's the political stuff was so
Definitely.
fiery
Look at this.
on social media.
Yep.
That and COVID. Yeah, those two things right there pushed everything up for the year. And then it all just kind of, people were getting tired of COVID.
Sure.
And they still are. And some people were kind of shying away, and Trump lost his accounts and things like that. So I think that probably had a little bit to do with that big drop in the social media interaction for news.
For sure.
People wanted to get back to looking at family pictures and seeing what people are doing again.
Right. He was just completely dominated. I remember hearing a lot of people saying he was really good for the news business because he really did get people to tune in. He definitely drove page views. At the local level, I have no idea what the stats would be. I would imagine they're similar, but I don't know. Yeah, it could just be partly people are burnt out on just too much information.
Well, it looks like they were also using a similar web for some of their
did they?
Their charting. We might want to grab an account on there because Get
Right.
really granular with which sites and by region and by category of site and all kinds
Right.
of things, which might be very interesting if you wanted to pursue this type of comparison.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm all for that. Let's talk about doing that more later. And the other thing I wanted to bring up on this, looking at these high level studies, sometimes it can be hard to take away something practical here. I just had some notes here on this. What can publishers do? What can local publishers do about this? And I just think focus on your marketing funnels and automate as much of that as you can so you can keep up with things and continue to put out a lot of content on social media, using your newsletters to funnel people into the website, promoting your website in the print edition. A lot of the stuff that we're just always talking about, just take back control of your own marketing and automate it as much as you can. And then once they get on the website, focus on ways to engage with the readers on the site and keep them coming back. This was an anomaly in 2020, unnatural force acting on it. Can we bring in another force for good, just to keep people interested, not because they're scared and they're trying to find out what's happening.
And so I would add to that by it's the type of content
yes
that the outlets need to focus on, which I think could bring the readership back. The more engaging, the more positive. The things you saw from Men's Gym, the things you see from Signals AZ, where it's real hyper local, it's neighborhood news, and that's what people seem to be from this chart, not wanting to see all the scary stuff. They would rather see what's going on in their neighborhood.
Like Guy is so against, any crime reports at all. He thinks that's just not the place of news, but that traditionally news has been kind of negative. Yeah. I just think focusing on what's going on in the community, highlighting feel-good stories. But from a technical perspective, we're doing this with related articles. That's going to show people other stories that they are likely to be interested in and generate another page view and more time on site. Audio articles, not really generating a lot of page views. I'll admit that because it's just not required to use the feature. You stay on a single page and listen to it. But the time on site is going to be much more. I think if you can just keep someone engaged for a long period, each time they come, they're going to be coming back more frequently. And then also just polls, surveys, getting user feedback, asking your users what they want to see more of. And that's just one data point that you can take into consideration about what you said, Chris, writing about things that people want to hear about. But I think you would also want to look at your data, the website analytics. You can look at your most popular categories, adjust your coverage that way. Just how much do we spend on covering sports, or where do we feature it on the website or in the print edition? Should we change that to serve our audience better?
Another thing too, Matt, is to promote the value of both your print and your digital.
Right, exactly.
You can promote the value of your print
Cross-promote
by saying, not everything is online. See this for, story in print, or not everything is in print. See our online edition.
Right.
It's not a bad thing to toot your own horn when you're in the news business.
For sure.
Statistics are every publisher's. That's what they have to. That's their thing. They have to be on top of it. And I think we preach to the choir when we say, look at your statistics, but
I know
it bears repeating. And, again, promote the value of what you do.
With this type of thing, I'm just thinking before we get off of this article and go to Tyler's, could we put in the development pipeline just some type of a quick digest? I think maybe even it's possible with Madamo now to send publishers a list of their most popular category, like the top 3 categories of the month or something. I don't know if there's any kind of report that we could create like that.
That's a great idea.
I'm guessing it exists, but it's probably just some spreadsheet. I'm picturing just like a real short email, top 3 categories, not like all the details of the statistics, but just showing them what's trending on their site. Even if you sit down with someone and walk them through looking at it, to have them go and do it on their own once a week or once a month is a whole nother thing. So
it can be time consuming. If we can, like you said, just break it down into simple, readable stats. I think that would be a great service that we could offer our customers.
So I found this article talking about essentially leaks between cookie permissions that have currently been noticed in Europe, and how that's kind of affecting advertisers' mindsets around programmatic ads and that kind of thing.
How does cookie consent impact your advertisers? This episode of Today in News Tech is made possible with audio articles by ourhometown.com. Today, we're highlighting a piece by Seb Joseph over at Digiday about recent anxieties over cookie consent among digital advertisers. The article, "The real issue here is around publisher trust, advertisers on alert as cookie consent concerns rise," speaks with advertising industry representatives about the precautions they're taking around cookie tracking. The implementation of the GDPR privacy law in Europe has led to increased scrutiny of how publishers are collecting data. They want to know if the audience targeting they're doing on publisher sites is using non-compliant cookies, and if so, how prevalent it is across the media they buy, said Joseph. Here are a few of our big takeaways. A recent audit has shown that many cookies being used to track users among the 1,000 biggest European publishers are doing so without consent. Publishers and advertisers are considering pulling cookies entirely if these consent leaks can't be brought under control. It is recommended to implement a consent management platform on a publication's site to ensure that cookies are being controlled and distributed in a way that ensures reader trust. Programmatic advertising is an ever-expanding industry, but these legal issues stand to stop that growth in its tracks. Because of this, Our Hometown developed its WordPress platform to be GDPR compliant and is constantly updating its policies around cookie tracking.
I got to be totally honest. I'm still learning and trying to understand what are the implications of.
Yeah, this is what's kind of sparked the big problem. And it's really interesting. The article kind of goes in depth on where these problems have come from. But essentially, a lot of it is a lot of advertisers are just doing cookie tracking, expecting to ask forgiveness instead of permission. That's all slipping through the cracks. There's also this really weird and kind of interesting case. Let me see if I can find it, of how these things are kind of getting through the cracks.
It's an ad network like Google AdSense, but not Google AdSense, some other ad network.
So this is kind of explaining how a lot of it is happening.
Great. Okay, great.
And so instead of the cookie directly tracking one thing, it's a chain of cookies tracking other cookies.
Let's just step back really quick. So like when you go to a publisher site,
Yes.
if they are running, let's say, one of these ad networks, the ad network puts a cookie on your browser in this case, but normally they're supposed to ask if it's okay.
Right.
So we ask at the bottom of all of our sites.
Yes.
But, okay, some of these sites in Europe just aren't asking. They're just
some aren't asking, but some are asking, but the cookie they put on isn't a one-to-one cookie, I believe is the issue.
Right.
So that cookie is then creating other cookies that just expand exponentially. Yeah,
I just came across that, Tyler, and I wonder what brought that about. There were a couple of sites, 2 or 3 that I've seen recently that had 2 options: accept all cookies or accept only necessary. Has anybody else seen that?
I have a couple of times, yeah.
Essentially, one primary cookie could subsequently call upon hundreds of other cookies. So then they could like delete the original cookie and say, the cookies that we give when people visit our sites, that's not on your browser. There's just these other cookies.
Putting those 2 things together, it sounds like the reader thinks they're accepting just the basic cookie that seems to, make sense, but really what they're getting is a whole mess of cookies.
I think it's like a network of cookies, basically. Like you're opting in instead of to a website, to a whole network.
That's not playing nice.
What is the status of this? Like, there's been announcements from Google that they're going to end third-party cookies. And now I'm seeing when I download apps, the apps are asking me to give them first-party data. You can see that everyone's trying to get ready for this. But is there some kind of like end of life on cookies out there right now?
I mean, it's not necessarily mentioned here. This article is basically about the advertisers desperately trying to find a path forward that doesn't involve that.
Exactly. The end of cookies is a disaster for marketers, but it is, I think, a good thing for publishers.
Like the current system, it just sounds unsustainable.
That ties into the new iOS features.
Yes.
That are against tracking, and people are trying to figure out how to get around that. Tyler,
Right.
could you scroll back up to where it starts talking about the TCF, transparency and consent framework, which seems to be some sort of prototypical method of handling this stuff, which doesn't seem to be serving the users as well as it's intended to.
Right.
That framework itself is found to be breaching the GDPR, it's saying.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely something we're really focused on. That's why we've got canned privacy policies for anyone that doesn't want to write their own. Also, you can bring your own in there, and we've got the whole pop-up at the bottom of the screen. Yeah, I think this just kind of plays right into this other question that I had. I had to get a new phone, so I had to download a bunch of apps, and I've just one after another, they're asking me to track activity across other companies' apps and websites. So are you guys seeing this, or is it maybe it's only when you download an app for the first time, so maybe you're not seeing it?
Yeah, I've gotten it. I think it's whenever I open an app the first time after an update, basically.
That's probably what I've been seeing too. Okay, so as I understand it, though, this is them getting ready. Peacock is NBC, and they're advertising on social media, but they're also publishers. So they can kind of come out of this okay if they start tracking their customers' data directly.
I see here there's very little explanation about what happens when you click allow.
It allows us to provide you with a more personalized ad experience. That's it. Yeah, it's nowhere near as detailed as our privacy policy.
Well, Terry mentioned when you have a cookie pop up, you can normally dig down into it if you don't just say accept all, and it'll have necessary ones for like feeding you embedded content and things like that. And then it also has personalized ones and all that you can just untick.
Right.
And this doesn't seem to offer that kind of granularity at all.
Maybe that'll come later, as there's more pushback. Right now, they're just trying to get it all. Carte blanche approval, just go out and collect all your data if you've downloaded this app. Once you download the app, then we're going to track you again across other apps and websites.
And they could be tying this into another video streaming app. You wouldn't even know. They could be tracking your Netflix viewing.
Yes, that's right. But I guess the difference comparing it to what we have now, there's just all the tech companies developed this technology and no one even understood what was going on. And at this point, they've got cookies on all of our browsers. So this is at least asking for approval. But yeah, it's the same idea as Google. They're just trying to take back what Google has claimed as their own, Google and Facebook. They came out onto the scene. They started tracking everyone. Now all publishers are realizing what has happened, what we've left on the table, and they're trying to pull it back. That's my impression. Any other comments on this, or how this could apply for local publishers? Right now, we don't have this in our app because a big part of our goals in 2022 are to do more personalized news, building on the related stories technology and make it even more personalized for each subscriber. So that's definitely first party data, and we're going to need people to opt into that. You make a good point. It's not well explained here. If we're going to do something like this, we should give a lot more resources to just explain why we're doing this. If they really understood what this was about, they would be okay with it. They would prefer a newspaper, their local newspaper, tracking them to Google, I would think.
Right. I think explaining how it's a case-by-case basis. I don't need my video streaming apps tracking what I'm doing, but there are other things where, I don't mind.
Well, in the experience of the related stories, we could specifically say we would like to track your activity on this one site, and then we can help personalize it. But we're not going to then use that data
to sell you ads.
Amazon ads to them.
I think we need to focus on how this is presented to the customer. And right now, what this says is, do you value your privacy or don't you? What you need to do is tell the customer, we value your privacy.
Right.
But we want to make this a better experience for you. Will you allow us to track the things that you like so that we can improve our service to you rather than on the privacy thing?
Yes.
Because if it has to do with my privacy, I'm not allowing anything.
I think what we would want to do is focus first on personalizing the content experience rather than the ads. Now, it's not like we have the inventory to personalize ads. We're not AdSense. And even if we were, there's not enough businesses in the local community to really allow you to personalize the ad experience. Allowing us to track you will provide you with a better editorial or content experience. We can send you more articles based on what you've read in the past and what we think you're interested in. And then it's a more personalized reading experience, not ad experience. I think you get a lot more people opting into that, as long as you didn't present it, in a very simplistic way, like you said, of either give up your privacy or don't.
Privacy isn't really the focus. We want
Right.
content and experience to be the focus.
Sure. Yeah.
Another point that would go back to the FTC article we did previously would be
Right.
a very easy way to opt back out of anything.
Yes.
Right.
Very good. I think that's the
was
consent
too
management system, right, Tyler? Is that basically
Yes.
what that does? These things are moving very quickly. I mean, GDPR has been around for like 5 years now, but things have accelerated. They're starting to crack down on this stuff.
Somebody catch me up. The GDPR isn't in the United States yet, right?
Right. California has a law that is similar. It's basically for Europe. They're trying to protect users. Again, I think publishers are in a good position to take advantage of this because you're not selling this data to the advertisers. You're going to be using it to provide a better experience to paying subscribers.
Right. We have to turn the negative into a positive.
That's very easy in this case for the publishers we work with. Thanks for watching Today in News Tech, the podcast covering innovation in digital journalism. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and subscribe on YouTube or any of your favorite podcast apps. We'll see you tomorrow.
At our hometown, we help newspapers build WordPress websites, design native apps, and develop digital subscription models. If you are interested in a free prototype of your publication on WordPress, go to ourhometown.com and click the Contact Us button.